Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And in today's video, we're coming at you with the AP Top 25 here after the latest in college football this weekend. Austin, you're here to bring some of your analysis, thoughts on these rankings, if they got it right or not with the Associated Press here and their top 25. There's a lot to break down from this most recent week of college football, as well as some really top end prospects to watch long term. Austin, let's get into it here with the 25 to 21 mark. Those bottom five schools here in the top 25, we have San Diego State, SMU, NC State, Arizona State, and Texas. The Longhorns making the list there at 21. Is there a specific team in those five that you would like to talk about specifically, maybe as a surprise team or a team that's just really been, on a roll lately?
I think some of the schools that aren't really surprising is the SMU and San Diego State, them being 5-0 and 4-0. I don't think that's really a surprise that they're here at this point, but once they, start to ramp up, maybe face a couple of better teams, I don't know if they'll stick there for that long. In this kind of range, it's always a revolving door throughout the entire course of the college season. Texas is a school that definitely did well for themselves, beating TCU this past weekend. So that is kind of what we're looking at with the 25 to 21 range.
Right, now moving into the 20 to 16 range, there's a little bit of a hot topic here possibly with the University of Florida at 3-2, still being in at number 20. We also have Wake Forest here at 19. They've been absolutely dominant as they're 5-0 at this point. Had another nice win this weekend. Auburn up here at 4-1, Ole Miss and Kentucky as well. I think Kentucky's been a school that's really been growing with their college football program as of recent years. They've got an offensive lineman who's going to be a potential first-round pick in Darian Kinnard. Austin, I want you to talk a little bit about the Kentucky Wildcats to start and then maybe transition to the Florida Gators. Give us a little bit of input on what's going on there at the University of Florida.
Kentucky had an absolutely humongous win over Florida. That is a game that not a lot of people thought they really had a chance in, to be completely transparent, considering how good Florida has been. Their only loss came to Alabama, and that was a very close game as well. But Kentucky's football program is completely transcending. This is known as the basketball school. They are not known for their football program, but they've been able to build that over the last couple of years, for sure, over the last 6 years. They've produced some really good NFL talent, including Josh Allen, the defensive end for Jacksonville, as the big name to pull from there. But they are an absolute team to watch at this point. They've surprised a lot of people, me, myself included. They hop all the way up from unranked into that 16th spot. Florida, that's a tough one to swallow, considering that they were hovering around that top 10 realm, and now they fall all the way to 20. Some people thought they should have even dropped further, but with how good Kentucky's been, they kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt, losing to two tough opponents in Alabama and, I guess, Kentucky now.
Right, one team we didn't touch on here in the top, in the range of 20 to 16 is Ole Miss. There's a quarterback prospect. We have a video up on the channel about him, Matt Corral, Austin. There's potential that he could possibly be quarterback one in this year's draft class. Talk about Ole Miss this year, what they've done, and also how Matt Corral's looked at that quarterback position.
Matt Corral's looked very, very good. Ole Miss, though, was completely overwhelmed by Alabama. They threw a lot of different looks at him, especially defensively. They had their huge struggles against Bryce Young. It was a complete overmatch in terms of everywhere on the field. They controlled the trenches, they controlled the skill positions, the wide receiver corner matchups. It was just a complete dominance by Alabama. Ole Miss, I thought, was kind of out of sorts early on in that game, but Matt Corral still looked decent. However, it's very, very tough going up against the best school in the nation in Alabama.
Right, Alabama does tend to make their opponents look not quite like themselves, and I think that is the truth here with Ole Miss. We saw them drop from 12th last week to 17th here in the Associated Press rankings this week. 15 to 11 now, we have Coastal Carolina, Notre Dame, Arkansas, Oklahoma State, Michigan State. Austin, Coastal Carolina was a team last year that kind of really started to come on. Looks like they're having that continued success again this year. And also Notre Dame, a team that has been kind of split among fans for college football. I know a lot of people think that Notre Dame's a really, really nice team, and there's also the other side that's saying that Notre Dame's been overrated, that they've been escaping some of their narrow wins this year, and then they went up against Cincinnati this week and lost in that game to the Bearcats. Are you hitting the panic button on Notre Dame, or are you more in the line of, hey, Notre Dame's a really good team, just went up against a better school this past week?
I think part of that, people are going to overreact because it's the name brand of Cincinnati, but Cincinnati is a really, really good football program as it currently stands. And, I'm not going to hit the panic button necessarily, but I kind of fall in the middle of the two groups that think either they're trash or they're a really good team yet. I think they kind of fall into the middle of that. I don't think they're a top tier program this season, and I don't think they should be in that college football playoff discussion, especially after that loss. I just don't see there being a pathway where they can earn themselves a right to play in that college football playoff. But they're a good team. They're going to stay in this top 25 consistently throughout the rest of the year. They'll probably stick in that top 15 yet. But right now, I'm not super high on this team.
Right, you're kind of following the traditional look here that the Associated Press is even following, putting Notre Dame basically in the middle of their list around that number 14 spot. I think it makes sense. I think it's a pretty good rating, and it seems like you agree with them there as well. Oklahoma State at 12 is a team I know you really keep your eyes on. You're a big fan of Oklahoma State football, like to watch it, like to tune into it. It's a big part of your Saturdays. Austin, what does Oklahoma State do well that puts them in the top 12?
Oklahoma State defensively is very, very impressive. And I know I've talked a lot about their offense and their offensive weapons that have gone on to play in the NFL, but defensively they've looked very, very good, especially last game. And I think that they are just a consistent team. They play the game the right way. They really have established the run once again this year, despite not having Chuba Hubbard, which is really impressive. Warren has taken that job, and he was not even expected to be the starter this season, but he has been lights out for this team. Another team, Arkansas, sits at 13. They got throttled by number 2 Georgia, but I think it really shows the true gap of how good Georgia and Alabama are compared to basically the rest of the field. I think those two are in a category of their own. We'll get to that in a minute. Arkansas did not look good in that game. They didn't even put up a fight. It was an absolute throttling. They didn't really punch them too much by having them only down at 13.
Right, that's everything you need to know from 15 to 11 here. Now we're moving into the top 10. Austin, you kind of alluded to the top 5 a little bit. And now from 10 to 6 here, we've got an interesting grouping of teams. You've got BYU, of course, in their first year without Zach Wilson after he went to the NFL, and the New York Jets got their first win today. Very awesome to see that for Zach Wilson. Then we have Michigan here, Oregon, Ohio State, and Oklahoma round out 9 through 6. And I think there's one really interesting one here that I think you'd love to talk about. It's Oregon and Ohio State. They matched up earlier this year, and Oregon defeated Ohio State. How does Ohio State get ranked above Oregon?
And that's the big problem I have with this top 25. Ohio State lost to Oregon in their head-to-head, yet Ohio State is ranked higher. I think part of the AP's thought process is Oregon lost to a worse opponent, technically, and that's why, they're punishing them for losing to Stanford, who's not that good of a team. And that's the issue that we're kind of seeing right now. I think that's why a little bit of recency bias, I believe, with this.
Right, and these two teams are two teams that are good enough to get into the back end of the college football playoff possibly. So the rankings here for those two teams I think is really vital as we go throughout the rest of the season. Ohio State, Oregon, both really good programs, really good teams. And that head-to-head matchup might come into play a little bit later in the year, especially if you're talking about, hey, who's maybe the 4th team to get into the college football playoffs? For me, it would be hard to eliminate Oregon from that, especially since Ohio State lost to them earlier on if it came down to those two teams for that number 4 position in college football playoffs. Now we move into the top 5 here, Austin. We had alluded to it a little bit earlier, and I think it's a really interesting group with a lot of talent on the field weekly here. We got the Cincinnati Bearcats with Desmond Ridder. He was an absolute beast in their win this past week over Notre Dame. Then we have Penn State. Jahan Dotson is a highlight machine for the Nittany Lions there. We got the University of Iowa. We know what they do, especially on the ground with that offensive line that they produce consistently. And then the two teams at the top that you had talked about, Georgia, Alabama. What's one key storyline you want to talk about here? And then we'll get into Alabama and Georgia right after that.
I think it's just Cincinnati just proving week in, week out that they deserve to be in this top 5. Obviously, the big win against Notre Dame. Penn State really showed out as well. Iowa, 2 Big Ten schools that, we did not think would probably reach these heights. I really didn't expect Iowa to reach the number 3 ranking. But I do want to talk about the difference between 1, 2, and then the rest of the field. Georgia defensively is just smothering teams, and it's not even close. We saw it against Arkansas, SEC rival. They were not able to muster up anything against this Georgia defense. And then we saw how dominant Alabama was against the high-powered Ole Miss offense. This was one of the most prolific offenses in the entire country. and they did a pretty good job neutralizing them for the most part. And those two teams at the top are really, really on their game. It would be interesting to see a matchup between the two of them. I think Alabama would come out on top. However, these two schools are for real this year.
Right, Alabama, Georgia, two illustrious programs when it comes to college football, especially in recent memory. Remember, there was the matchup between those two programs a few years back as well. So they're a fun collection of teams to keep our eye on. A lot of NFL talent, especially with those top 5 teams. Cincinnati's got 3 guys who could go in the first round. Penn State's got a couple really notable players. Iowa has, of course, Linderbaum, who could go in the first round as well. There's a lot of talent along these schools. Austin, do you continue, or do you expect these top 5 teams to be the ones that we see throughout the season staying in this top 5?
I think Oklahoma has a chance to leapfrog Cincinnati, but Oklahoma scares me a little bit. We've seen some very, very close calls in some of their games against lesser opponents. K-State, once again this past weekend, it was another close call. We saw in the Tulane game, that was another close call where they very well could have lost or one bounce away from potentially losing those games. But I think Oklahoma has a chance to move on and potentially get into that college football playoff conversation. But I'm very nervous about them. I think, once again, Ohio State has a chance to also crawl back up there too. Iowa is a school that might be playing pretender. I'm not exactly sure what I make of their start so far this year.
Right, that'll be something that we have to monitor throughout the season. If you guys are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We're going to be breaking down the AP Top 25 every single week here at the college football season. We also have a whole bunch of NFL mock drafts on our channel. We really break down a lot of these college prospects for you and let you know everything that you need to know about these players moving forward. Again, hit that like button on today's video. Let us know if you did enjoy in the comments. Thanks again so much for watching. Austin, thanks for putting together your thoughts on this top 25, and we'll catch you guys in the very next video.